one for lunches and one for breaks.
No, it's one article. There's no reason why we can't talk about an unpaid lunch break in one paragraph and 15-minute breaks in one article. There's two subjects in one article. I don't see a need to have two separate articles.
All right, so the first part of the first paragraph, employees shall be granted an unpaid meal break.
Unpaid break. It doesn't. It's defined after. It says during each shift period for a meal period. So.
Can we just standardize that language?
I'm
Break
certainly
period. Let's get some consistency.
I'm fine. Whatever you want to do. As long as it's,
Employees
if you're creating a counter proposal, I'm certainly interested in looking at it. If you want to work on it together, this is our proposal.
All right, so are you okay with employees shall be granted an unpaid meal?
Period of 30 to 60 minutes for each shift. That's fine. Once it all adds up to the same thing. If you're just trying to make some grammar changes, I'm not opposed to that.
All right, and then the second part of that, the duration is dictated by the supervisor and business necessity. So it could vary from day to day, week to week, as long as it's no less than 30 and no more than 60.
That's the way the proposal is, correct.
Okay. And then you want...
If you want to change the word dictated to determine, I'm not opposed to that. It means the same.
Okay. So the last sentence, that they have to receive prior approval, that in most cases would be verbal, right?
Yeah, I mean,
to keep forms available for the waiver out in the field.
Yeah, I don't know if there's a process in place for that now. I don't know if is there such a form, or what happens when someone's...
Usually you just refer to do it with your supervisor if that's the case.
There's never been an issue with...
No. For us, I don't know about any of the other departments. How about library?
Yeah, no reason for that. I guess it's so the employer knows. And no. You got to take your lunch. If someone says I want to work through my lunch break, okay, fine. Still.
A lot of times lunch is not the same every day, especially I'm sure in the other departments. Sometimes stuff breaks loose. You got to work through and then take lunch after the fact. I mean, that's just the nature of the beast.
The supervisor needs to know, though, because it could result in overtime.
Right, for sure.
I think the big problem with lunches is public transportation.
Are they not entitled to a lunch when everyone else is?
I've had that conversation with the manager, and I've been told that the industry standard is they do not have lunch.
How do they get away with that, though? I mean, that doesn't seem...
Does Hernando have a bus system, transit system?
Yes.
And how
Yeah,
is it dealt with
they're
under
not
this?
in our
They're not here yet.
I don't know if they're HEU, I don't know if they're not represented, I don't know.
Do they get back from breaks or anything when they're in the bus?
I believe so. I'm not sure how that works.
No, I thought I heard they did saying something about jars or something one time, didn't they?
Yeah, what's his name says he's not allowed to go to the bathroom. Yeah, and then also, yeah,
The way their schedules are so tight that there is really no bathroom break time.
That's unhealthy.
He's indicated.
That's something that needs to be addressed, for sure.
Yeah, and I, you know, I do understand that if, I don't represent, there's an employer on this Hillsborough area regional transit part, and, Teamsters Local 79 actually represents the supervisors and the dispatchers in our group. The bus operators are represented by AGU, and I have heard it mentioned that their breaks are kind of built into their run because they have enough periods of time that they have to wait. And so is there something, you know, along that line that you need to adjust for the bus operators, or they obviously would look at a counter? But the lunch thing, I mean, it's just hard to believe that. Sorry, we just don't have time for you to take lunch, and it's just unheard of.
That's the only division that I know of where there's that issue.
Yeah, with as many stops as they got, you would think that they could, you know, schedule a break in there at one of them stops or something. You would think, but, yeah. Have them
But what do you do with the people on the bus while you're having lunch for a half hour?
Well, sometimes when they go to the mall there and they sit in front, they run in, we're gonna run in and go to the bathroom. I guess they were told not even to leave the bus to do that, so.
That I don't know about. I know the issue about lunches.
I know.
Yeah.
It's a matter of
I would
scheduling.
never-
It's
yeah.
common sense, and it's a matter of scheduling. So
They
they
could
have to
schedule
schedule.
it, or send it on the
Yeah.
place at a point to work.
Well, one person could go out and meet that bus and go with them for half an hour, meet
Yeah.
somewhere else.
I mean, we're not trying to be a pain in the butt, just think about it in the modern world.
It's only fair.
I just figured out the difference between transit systems that run on time and those that don't.
You know what I mean?
Breaks in the
I think there's poor management, the ones that can't run on time. I don't think it's a matter of worker.
Well, your point of view is everything's poor management, so.
Well,
How many times you
else
gonna
could
do
it
that
be?
well?
If someone's managing a business and the business is not performing properly or well, I mean, whose fault is that? It's management, right?
They don't have good contracts.
They don't have good management skills.
They don't
That's
have
what
good
they don't have.
contracts.
So it's a
And
matter of,
quality
I'm sure it can be figured out. I don't.
Well, that's something we definitely need to address. Let's
All right.
talk to the bad contract guys and think about it.
We'll come back to the public transportation bargaining unit members. You'll have a separate proposal for them.
Do I have a separate proposal?
Well, you will, I mean, you're gonna come back.
I'm not coming back with anything. This is our proposal. If you have a need to alter this proposal to address a segment of your workforce, then I would expect your counter to address it. I don't need to have a counter. This proposal works for us. There's no reason why a bus operator can't get a lunch break and take two 15-minute breaks during the course of his shift. There's just no reason other than the county not willing to, or whoever's setting the schedules.
John, under your language, the reason they could not get one is because your language says their supervisor and business necessity can eliminate it.
No, eliminate it.
It doesn't have to be
The
granted.
time of the meal period. So if you're misunderstanding our proposal that a lunch break is subject to being canceled, you're reading it wrong. The time of the meal period,
It says
as well as the duration, okay, being between the two options that are given, 30 minutes or 60 minutes, shall be, well, changing to determined by the supervisor. Not the idea that you don't get a lunch today, or I want you to take a 15-minute lunch today. Those are not options afforded to the supervisor. It's just when the meal period takes place. And I would imagine that if it starts becoming a habit, that every single day of the 8-hour or 10-hour shift, the supervisor determines, well, due to business necessity, I can only give you your lunch break at the 9 hour and 30 minutes into your shift. That we would take a look at that time. Well, why is it business necessity prohibiting you from giving the man or the woman a break somewhere toward the middle of their shift, but there's nothing in the contract proposal saying that there's a certain window period of time, but we would just hope in good faith that the idea of a lunch break. I mean, you can end up with a more productive employee. I would imagine if you
Okay.
let them take a lunch break in the middle of the day.
That just doesn't seem right today when you look at it. In a modern world.
Yeah.
agree with you, it doesn't sound practical, and it probably doesn't operate at, at the extreme that has been described. Probably the transit operators are taking bathroom breaks at some point, and they're eating somewhere along the line, right? And that's probably the way it's actually working.
Well, the bus guy that we normally have in is not here today, that's not what we've been told.
Well, we hear a couple of things from him over time that weren't factually on point, so I would take that with a grain of salt.
Have you ever verified anything he said to be factually incorrect?
He
Or
corrected
you just ask
it.
him a question that he can't answer?
He corrected it at one point.
At one point. So
Yeah.
one time he said something and we challenged him on it, and so now he's being,
I didn't challenge him on it, we asked questions to understand what he was doing, and he corrected himself.
I don't know if bus operators are bringing a jar to work to piss in during the course of the day, but we've been told that. So
I've never heard that.
I know it happens
So,
in other places that are non-union where people don't have an opportunity to take a break. They do it. They bring a piss jar with them because they can't stop. It's wild, crazy. And if that's happening here, I would imagine you would think that that's probably,
Well, if that were happening here, I would feel you would know it at this particular point, representing
I
the
just
interest
heard,
of the bargaining.
I just told you what I've heard.
Okay.
What is an employee to do?
Did you
who
interview the
doesn't have a
employee
contract?
that was, you were told about it? I mean, did you look into it? Is it true or not? Or you were just told it?
well, this bus driver says he's done it.
If I'm told by somebody that something's happening, looking into it and investigating it, what am I going to get as a result of my investigation? Someone else telling me it? Someone else saying that they've done it or they've seen it? I mean, I'm not going to sit there and sit on a bus and watch someone piss into a jar to prove that it's happening. I think I can probably take people's word for something is happening, because something like that is not uncommon in the transportation industry in a non-union sector. I've heard people saying that that's what you have to do when you go work for some of these J.B. Hunt type of companies, because you don't have a choice. Anyway, that's our proposal on breaks and
All right, take it into consideration.
we have a new proposal on disciplinary procedure. This is also like the last two proposals that were put forward. The language from the Hernando County VOCC agreement, Teamsters Local 79. Section 1 is a simple just cause provision. Section 2 is a proposed path for discipline. Understanding that everything falls under the just cause provision. Section 3 has a statute of limitations for giving verbal and written warnings, and as well as having a sunsetting provision in the second paragraph of section 3.
You're not suggesting by the last paragraph that somebody who received a verbal warning, that after 1 year, that verbal warning wouldn't be considered notice for just cause standards, are you?
That's exactly what it's proposing. You can read. For the purpose of progressive discipline, verbal warning shall not be considered after 1 year.
No, and that wasn't my question. I understand what you mean by progressive discipline, but it doesn't have any weight on the scale. What I'm saying is it doesn't extinguish the notice requirement, does it, under just cause? That's different. It's a different question. I understand that you say it has no weight after 1 year, but what about the notice component of just cause? It could be used to establish that, right?
If you're giving notice to an employee, and you want to say that this is the third time I've given you notice, and the first 1 or 2 times occurred outside of the 1 year time frame, then you would be progressing your discipline based on discipline within 1 year.
What I'm talking about is, in a just cause discipline, there's elements of it.
I understand.
All right, so what are the other-
Notice is one of them.
Notice is one.
Right, notice,
So-
my understanding of notice is that it asks the question of whether the employee knew of what the rule was. Was it disseminated properly? Was it the employee given a clear understanding of what the rule is? Did they acknowledge and understand it?
Exactly, correct. So even though the weight of it disappears after 1 year, the notice part of it is still satisfied. I wouldn't have to prove notice. All I'd have to do is present a copy of the record of the verbal warning, right?
I would imagine that you would present that in a hearing, and the local union representative, whether it's myself or someone else, would probably take issue with that as being untimely, and then the arbitrator, whoever's presiding over the case, would probably make a judgment call on whether it can be considered, because how could it not be considered holding weight if you're presenting it to say that this is not the
If it's
first
a
time you've
contract
heard
decision,
it?
would say it has no weight. What I'm saying is, if we were to agree with that, would you agree that we don't have to prove notice under just cause? So we would say to the
I see it as a
arbitrator.
different subject.
No, I think they're very much connected, because if you think about it as a matter of proof before an arbitrator, because that's what your proposal really gets us to, they're not inseparable. They go together. I'd like to be able to say to the arbitrator, we have already satisfied the notice requirement. Here's a copy of a record of a verbal warning on that point, so we have established that the employee knows there's a rule. I would want you to say, if you were the person, there's no dispute over that.
Well, what if that verbal warning and/or written reprimand was in dispute? In other words, you gave me a verbal warning for being 10 minutes late, and I'm telling you, you got the wrong John Smith because I was here. And they say, well, too bad.
I'm not talking about that component of it, John.
Well,
I'm talking about the notice of the rule component of it.
I understand that, but if you've given somebody a verbal warning or a written reprimand, and you want to use it as fulfilling your notice requirement to an employee, and the union's position that verbal warning or that written reprimand was completely unwarranted, unjust, and just off base, then I'm not going to agree to the fact that that fulfills your notice requirement. So you can't just can't give, I can't assure that I'm going to agree to that.
All right, then we certainly couldn't agree that, verbal warning or written notice or suspension disappears at some point. They would still be, in our view, be considered for progressive discipline. They would have less and less weight over time, obviously.
Well, then you know the answer to your question.
No, I was focused on the notice part of it. You're still confusing it with the weight issue, but since you won't compromise with me on the notice issue, you can't expect me to compromise with you on it disappearing.
What do you gain from giving notice if it doesn't have weight?
I've cleared one of the hurdles of a just cause discipline. That's what I've done. Depending on whose interpretation you like, I got 6 or 7 hurdles to clear. The burden's on us, is it not?
Correct.
Okay. You prepared to shift the burden?
Would
the union accept the burden in a just cause case?
No, I know exactly where the burden lies in just cause. I'm the employer. All I'm saying is an arbitrator is going to decide whether he wants to give previous verbal warnings either weight or at least fulfillment of the notice, whether or not I agree to that or not. And he may want to hear what you have. He's probably going to want to hear what you have to say, and he's going to sort it all out later. And so this proposal is pretty clear that's saying that it will not be considered, it will not be given weight. So you say you can raise that argument in the arbitration hearing. I'm not going to acknowledge that you have a right to take the position that it fulfills the notice when I may completely, totally disagree with the nature of the verbal or written reprimand in that particular case. I mean, it's just there's too many variables to give a blanket agreement on, so you would present your case to the arbitrator, and he's going to give it the proper way to think.
The same argument works in reverse, that there's too many variables to agree that a verbal warning would have no weight after 1 year.
It works for us in other locations, and so this is our proposal.
We'll take it under review.
We have one more proposal, titled Article 19, some garden. Just like the other ones that have been taken from additionally ratified Hernando County VLCC agreement. And like I said earlier, several of the components of the previous, your proposal for Article 43 can be found in this article. Case in point, section 4, where it talks about overtime, layoff and recall. This is not in the schedule, you're working overtime, but some of the language that's in 43 is in here now.
In your section 4, on this issue of overtime based upon seniority, have you established, has Hernando established, in conjunction with your agreement, written procedures for that? Do they use a seniority wheel system?
We have different applications. This contract is, this revision, to put the word written before procedures, is new, it's fresh. I do have Department of Public Works in Hernando County, I actually do have a written procedure, and it just varies, from department to department. Some of them prefer to have, a kind of a rotating overtime wheel, and some of them prefer to have top down, but it's too fresh for me to have a stack of different procedures.
So what's your thought here as a one size fits all going into the contract? Do you favor everybody having an opportunity to work overtime, i.e. the seniority wheel that rotates, or each time it opens up, the most senior employee gets to work it?
I would like the stewards and the members to have input on that, and that's the reason why this language is developed as it is, because there's just, certain work groups have been doing things a certain way, and it works for them, and so, I prefer to have that work group, have the option or the decision to make of whether they think that they want to continue doing what they're doing, or if they feel that things have not been working. That's part of the reason why they decided to organize.
So if we signed off on this today, how would it be applied tomorrow? It wouldn't be, we'd have to.
I would just say that until we sat down and worked out written procedures, and the status quo would remain in effect. So whatever the current practice is, until we can get there. And I would like to, immediately get on it.
When you say work groups, what does that break down to?
It all depends. I mean, departments versus work sites. You can have. You can't just do it by classification. That doesn't work. So, we've done things departmentally in Hernando.
Just for the purposes of bringing closure to this issue, so that we could implement something, would you agree to pick one or the other and then work on the issue of the work groups later? That meaning that seniority would be either a seniority wheel or it would be the most senior?
Well, I don't think we have much to really.
You know what I mean? Set the general rule and then over time build the exceptions to it.
I would rather have the option to, to get with the workers. It's been a long time since some of these workers have communicated to me anyway. I mean, I got to get even with the committee to say, how do you feel overtime, job assignments, shift selection, should apply in your work area. And do you want to have a hybrid? Do you want to have, well, John, we want job assignments and shift selection to be top down, but over time we can spread the juice around and have a wheel, or we may have a long wheel for all three, or we may want to just do top down for all three. So, if this is starting to if we're getting close to getting a full agreement, I can certainly ramp up and give you a more solid direction on where the work groups are, number one, and
Well, I don't think handing us, the Hernando County language does us any good to bring closure to the issue. I really think that the process of finding out whether you want to break it down by work groups or departments or divisions, that should have occurred already. That should be part of your
it
proposal.
says departments and divisions. So, first of all, I'm sure you don't agree what is good for Hernando is good for Pasco, but we do. And so as far as it's...
Well, I don't know whether I
within
agree
each-
or not. I
within
mean,
each department
I'm not in
within-
Hernando, I'm here.
Okay. Which, it says within each department/division. So if you say, John, we're willing to agree to your proposal, but we need a little bit more specificity with respect to where are you considering that these written procedures will govern. The whole thing falls under the umbrella of seniority, as Article 19 is titled. So,
But that's the point I'm making, is you have a clause in here that says that the county and the agent will establish written procedures.
Right.
My question is, what do we do until that's done?
and I answered your question. Do you remember?
No,
Keep
no.
the status quo until we can work out a specific department. How many times do you want me to say the same thing?
The status quo varies. There is no etched in stone status quo on that kind of issue.
Well, you'd be surprised.
The status quo is the discretion of who's in charge, of management.
Seniority is recognized, from what I understand, and the bus drivers, transportation department or division, whatever you call it, it's recognized there, it's utilized, and it'll continue to be utilized and recognized until we can sit down. As far as, what the procedures are going to cover, say, well, if you're going to poll employees, how do we poll them? Do we do it by phone? Do we do it by text message? Do we do it by posting? Those are the type of procedures. The concept of seniority, if I had to make a statement, when in doubt, do things top down with seniority, and unless we can, if that's the answer you're looking for, unless we decide something otherwise, because that's what the proposal says, based on seniority.
I'm not looking for a specific answer, I'm looking for an answer. And if
Okay,
it's top down, at least I've got something now to work with. Okay?
What do you call seniority? A wheel is not seniority. Wheel is a constant rotation. It doesn't have anything to do with, the only thing seniority could have an effect on the wheel is starting the whole thing. And then it's no longer seniority. So if this thing says overtime based on seniority, how does a wheel fit into the word
Because it
seniority?
goes from most senior to next senior
Okay.
to next senior.
I'll break this down and I'll speak slower. To start the wheel, right? And then
To
after the
continue
wheel is
the wheel.
started, then it just goes one guy after the next.
It
And
goes by
there's no
seniority.
longer a seniority aspect to
That's
it.
nonsense. So there's so
It
many
is nonsense,
contracts
because you don't
that
want to agree
recognize
with it.
the seniority wheel as a means of spreading overtime through the entire bargaining
A
unit.
seniority wheel to me is an oxymoron. It's one or the other. You're either going to have seniority or you're going to have a wheel.
Well, you
You can start the
you
wheel
must have
by
just thought of
seniority,
that.
or
You
you can
must have
start
just
the
thought
wheel
of
by
that, Joe,
random.
because 10 minutes ago it was either top down or it was wheel.
Yeah.
So you,
Correct.
So make up your mind. If it's top down, that's fine. What we'll do with your proposal to make it top down in each occurrence is to go to
All right.
the supervisors to say, is that all right with you?
I want to reserve the right to have the employees, like I said earlier, to have input on how one or more of these three components of Article 19, Section 4 will be applied. That's what I said. I want to have the employees have the ability to have input. So some employees may choose to not have overtime awarded by seniority. they want to have it awarded by a wheel, but they want to have shift selection offered as seniority. I want to have the employees that have the input.
Well, you haven't had enough time the last 3 years to see what they want?
I've had plenty, Barbara, what does that have to do with anything?
It's very
This
important.
proposal is
It's
dated
very-
5/23/13.
But we've
So
been
have
talking
I had
about,
enough time since 30 minutes ago to propose
how
this?
long have we been talking about seniority? I mean, really?
For quite a while.
Yeah, and you don't know what your people want.
I would like first of all, the members to decide what they want when this thing is ratified. Not now,
Well,
not 2 years ago,
I
not 3
cannot
years
see,
ago.
I cannot see a scenario where we agree without knowing what we're agreeing to. I cannot see that happening.
I'm sorry
Because,
you feel that way.
there's a big difference to me between bus drivers selecting shifts quarterly or routes quarterly, or versus every single utilities crew, every single job that they do needs to go by seniority, every single moment. In my mind, there's a big difference between like that quarterly thing and interrupting every aspect of it every day.
Okay.
And I think that needs to be spelled out.
I'm fine with sitting down and getting into the nuts and bolts upon agreement, at least a conceptual agreement that, you know what, Teamsters, we get it. You guys are all about seniority, we get it. But you know what, we're gonna have a little bit of a need to get things worked out because, like you just said, I can't have our operation disrupted by taking 15 polls during the course of a day. We get that.
Yeah, so
Okay,
we need to
we
know
get
what
that,
you
but
want.
the thing is, once you embrace this concept, we can sit down and start working out the details and working them out fairly, so there isn't a disruption. But if you're just gonna say, you know what, I don't agree to your concept of seniority, period, then I don't have to waste my time.
I just said quarterly route selection, things like that, 911 shifts, things like that. Okay, as long as it's, that's not disruptive. And it's probably good for everybody. But when you get into, you have things like job assignments. Somebody can have 20 job assignments in a day.
All right. And someone can
I
have
mean-
20 shit job assignments in a day. And so what we want
So
to
you
have
need
is
to see
the
what-
ability, in certain circumstances, and that's the reason why this is such a big operation, if we are on the same page with the concept that seniority should prevail and that people should be treated or rewarded for their time spent at the county, then we can say, well, in this particular work group, and I'm going to use a landfill, every morning at the landfill there's a stack of job assignments for the day. So it's real easy in that application. Okay, who's first? All right, Mike, you got the highest seniority, what do you want? And then, and are you qualified? It's just real easy. They do it every day to get into a groove, and it's not disruptive at all. And so things may be that easy. It may be a little bit more complex in certain job functions where you have work crews. Okay, well, we have work crews, and you decide who you want on the work crews. You get that. Okay, because certain people work together, or certain people have certain skills that would complement the other ones. Now you have 5 work crews. Okay, within that work crew, one guy is going to have to dig the ditch. The other guy is going to have to move the piece of equipment. And the other guys. So now we have a little break off of the job assignments with them. And it doesn't have to be everything done in writing. It's
It's
just
not as complicated as you're making it.
very
It works within the groups.
It's complicated to you, Bob, because you've never apparently had to deal with it before.
And it's more efficient too, because when they
You can't see it
choose,
being more efficient.
and they work together and they agree on it, the work days,
It's gone by seniority, so
It's
who's
less-
agreeing to what?
It's less efficient.
how they're
It's
gonna
less-
use it, how they're gonna use the seniority.
It's less
I
efficient
think
when you got
you need
someone
to-
who feels slighted, who's got a chip on their shoulder, who feels like they've been, treated like crap, and they're forced to doing a job that the entire work crew, the job's gotta get done, but that person keeps getting stuck with the less desirable job when,
Well, that person is gonna be the person with the least seniority under your model, and they're always gonna get that job that they don't
as
like.
long as they're on the bottom, and that's the beautiful thing about seniority, that not everyone's on the bottom forever. And that's what makes it so fair, because as time goes on, people move up. And it doesn't matter who you know, or what the color of your skin is, or anything else. It's just a matter of, it's a fair way of doing things. And so, again, you have my commitment to work out a system that will not interfere or restrict your ability to carry out your mission as a county. It works. It works in Hernando, it works in Citrus, it works in other places, and there's no reason why it can't work here if they're doing this to make it work. I'm not interested in making the county go backwards, that's at least that's the furthest thing from my mind. But we want to have these workers feel good about this contract and have the ability to have their seniority rewarded. Does anyone
Well,
want to comment on anything? With
I
respect?
think you need, this is my opinion, you need to find out what your people want.
I already told you
and
what my
come-
people want. My people want
You still
seniority,
have-
Barbara. Pay attention.
Well, okay, we're not discussing anymore, we're back to our, yeah, I'm telling you what needs to be done for us to agree. We need to know what we're agreeing to, bottom
Okay.
line.
Do you agree with the
Which
concept of
department,
seniority?
and it depends on what it's for. And I just said, if you're talking about quarterly route selection, fine. If you're talking about every friggin' job, 20 jobs in a day, no.
Okay,
That's
what
where I'm
about-
at. So you need to see, what do your people want?
I already know
And
what people want.
You just
Now,
said
let me just
earlier,
ask
you
you,
haven't
let me
talked
ask
to your
you this
people.
question. Do you agree or disagree with some of the scenarios I just explained?
Not the thing where all day long you're looking at the seniority list.
I didn't suggest that. I said that's something that I think wouldn't work. I said the idea about if you have work crews or work groups, or if you have, let's just take the landfill scenario I gave, where every morning they're at the
Yeah.
counter and everybody starts at the same time and there's a stack of job assignments. Do you agree with the concept that those assignments should be doled out in seniority, provided they're all equally qualified or can do the work that's in those
Well,
assignments?
first off, they're not all equally qualified. You know that.
I don't know that. If you have 5 heavy equipment operators, and they're all qualified to run every piece of machinery in the landfill, and you have 5 assignments on 5 different machines, some of them are considered more desirable to operate than others. One guy's on the compactor, one guy's on the welder, one guy's on this, one guy's on that. Are you opposed to the concept that those work assignments are going to be offered in seniority?
Well, say that's what that was your proposal, okay? I would go back to the landfill manager and say, does this work for you? Same thing with whatever you come up with parks or libraries or utilities. You know, you need to have, okay, this is our plan. I go back to the managers and say, because they're the ones that are gonna have to live with it.
I understand.
So that's what I would do. With this vague thing,
It's what's came first, the chicken or the egg. It's like, okay,
Well-
if you can agree to that the seniority is going to apply, then we can sit down and start getting into the nuts and bolts, like I said.
You have to do it that way, Barbara, because you can't go to the managers and ask them
I've
first.
been asking for examples ever since, I think
I
our
think I
first
just gave you
meeting,
about half a dozen in this conversation
our
alone.
first
Okay.
meeting, and you have never come up
I can
with.
give you some examples. Over facilities, you got Tech 4s, Tech 3s, Tech 2s, Tech 1s. It doesn't necessarily mean a Tech 1 can't do a Tech 4's job. Maybe in your mind it does, but our Tech 4 has got a bachelor's degree. That's why he was on call. I hold a master's license. I also an inspector's license. But he goes and grabs all the good stuff, like changing out panels, which he shouldn't do. He's not licensed. Every place else in the state of Florida, you've got to be licensed. He goes out and grabs, we're working EOC. We found out the EOC air conditioning units didn't go down when the fire alarm system went on. He says they don't have to. I beg to differ. You don't want air conditioning units running when there's a fire. That's the code. He grabs those. But I don't have no place to complain because he's the 4. And my supervisors say he can do it. You have no way to cooperate. You're saying you can do it. You
Well,
can't
see,
do it.
you're bringing up something else, because with seniority, my thinking, correct me if I'm wrong, my thinking is you're comparing all, say, special equipment operators. But are you comparing Apple?
Well, as Bruce's scenario just explained.
That's
the-
different job titles.
Well, the thing is, but what was the work assignment? And if they're all in the same work group, and how many people are in their particular?
11 on the west side.
Okay, you got 11 guys, I do all fours, and you said, oh, I want that easy assignment over there. Well, that easy assignment over there is one work, you know? So, well, I can do one, you know, but then I don't have anybody else to do the floor work. And so, you know, this scenario he described, you're gonna, you know, I would imagine you're gonna have to look at the work assignments and look at the employees who are there to do the work. And so, if there's 3 4s and 3 2s and 3 1s, and each one of those work assignments is doled out, you can't leave a work assignment for 4 when all you have left is 1, so common sense would say that you prioritize them. Again,
But that's a very good point,
Wow.
John, actually. Now, that's a good example, and I appreciate that.
sure.
But, see, if you look at the last clause of section 4, it doesn't allow for the fact that after the senior employee, whose skill and ability and knowledge puts them in a position to do every job, it doesn't allow for the situation where the senior employee or a group of senior employees cherry pick the lightest work, leaving only work that people with less skills can't do. How do you deal with that?
By creating and establishing written procedures. And this is the reason why I've explained till I'm blue in the face, because you've been asking the same question. I agree for a couple of years now. Well, until we see these written procedures, let's agree to the concept. If we can't agree to the concept, there's no point in moving forward with establishing procedures that you're never going to agree to. And so these scenarios we're describing, I mean, we can all fully understand that there's so many varied work jobs out there, but when you have something based on an overall concept of seniority, and you say, John, we can't do top-down seniority in this department where Bruce Lee works because for this reason we have 4 different classes of employees and we have that work that needs to be done, okay, let's use a common sense solution. You're going to offer the work, break up the work into the different classifications of the work. It's not difficult. I'm willing to work, and I'm not trying to impede or you know, create any problematic situation. I'm just trying to get my foot in the door for the county to buy into the concept of seniority.
Okay, so if the written procedures are a key component of it, but they obviously can't get done right away, if we were to buy into the concept just to get started, would you agree that until the written procedures are in place, that the kinds of decisions where a supervisor says to a senior employee who wants to pick a task, you can't do that today because that will only leave this work for somebody who can't do it, would you agree that's not agreeable until we have the written procedures in place?
I'm willing to as long as I don't have any sort of delays or hesitancy in getting these written procedures established. And I said that earlier, that I would imagine the status quo is going to be maintained for the most part. And you said, well, the status quo now is we don't recognize seniority. Well, then there's all the more urgency to get these things worked out.
And the reason I ask that, if you would agree to that it's not agreeable, because I don't want to to come to understand the procedure through the grievance process. I'd rather come to it through the agreement on the written procedure. You know what I mean? I spend all our time doing grievances to figure out what it means.
I understand, but again, I'm going to have the cooperation that we're going to make this a priority, and there's, you know, that we can sit down and bang this out over a week's time. I think just going, and I'll tell you what we did in Hernando. We sat in a room, and it was every department, I mean, I don't know about everyone, but most of them in the bargaining unit. There was 12, 14 people sitting in this room, and I was on this side of the table with Steve Mosley, and, you know, for the most part, we just did, hey, this is the way we're going to do it here. Cool. This is what we're going to do it there. All right. No, all this stuff was just done by discussion. And it was simple enough to work
So
out.
you have, I thought you said you didn't have the written procedure.
This word written was just added in. And
I know, but you just said you got together.
I do, since this has been ratified, already have Department of Public Works give me a
Oh,
list
so
in
it's
the
just,
form of an
I
email.
thought you said all the department heads were in that.
No, we all got together in a meeting, and we had to
And you didn't come up with the,
there was nothing written, produced out of it. We didn't need to. We didn't need to. Everything went along fine.
so you don't
I
have
don't-
anything that shows what they're doing with seniority? Because I know I
I
asked
do.
this
I
years
just told
ago.
you, I have something written even since this contract was implemented with Department of Public Works. And if I don't, have a problem sharing with it, I don't necessarily see the value in it.
John, when there's, to me, when, labor management relations are going okay, the clause would say the business agent in the county will establish procedures. Doesn't need the word written, okay, when things are all going along just fine. And I'm curious that in Hernando, I think you
Yeah,
said
yeah.
that before the word written is new, was that a union proposal or a county
There
proposal?
was, it was a mutual thing. It was actually before I came back as a business agent. It was, they tried out this interest-based bargaining concept through PERC. Sue Putnam, I don't know if you know her or not. She, they did this group session thing, and they came up with that. Well, we need to have some procedures. I will say that in the landfill, there was some question about overtime and how it's going to be distributed, and that is the only group, that I've met with just last week to talk about this. Well, we got to have our written procedures established, and the Scott Harper, the manager of the landfill, I met with him and Union Stewart. We got everything worked out verbally, so we do need to reduce it to writing. It's just good to reduce them to writing. And I would just like to add, the county didn't attempt to eliminate this language. They didn't come back after 3 years or 4 years, by the time it was all said and done, come back and said, this language is just wreaking havoc on it. They didn't do that. All they did was change, this one word of.
Tweaked it out, yeah. Barbara, it seems it's new to you, but it's happening in other places and it's working.
Yeah,
And I know you feel like, you're not the guinea pig that's going to try this new system out. You're just going to join what's going
I
on.
cannot agree with something and then go back to the department heads after everything's all signed and everything and have it where it's not workable for them.
Well, you have to agree to the concept first, and then work the procedures out. You can't work procedures out for a concept that ain't accepted. It's just,
Give example, you need to say, this department, we want to use it for X, Y, Z, this department, we want to use it for this.
Okay, well, in light of all the things you said, okay, including your representative, that he'd rather work these things out than to fumble through them with grievances built on quicksand, and again, I believe I have a reputation for doing what is fair. I believe I have that,
I haven't worked with you with it,
in that context, right?
you
But the
know,
thing is that,
and I know how much, I've worked with other unions, and I know how much a pain he has every single grievances, and I don't want to spend all my time on grievances, it's not productive.
all right, well, then that should, I guess, influence you to want to get together and if we have a commitment and say, well, John, I don't know if I can agree to this, or why can't you agree to it? Because I don't know if it's going to work in DPW, I don't know if it's going to work in stormwater, I don't know if it's going to work in, road and bridge, whatever. And say, well, what are the circumstances there? I don't know, I need my department head. Well, then fine, let's just sit down and meet with the department head. But I will say one thing, that if the department head comes there and sits down with you, me, and him, or whomever, and a steward for that area, and he's got his arms crossed and shakes his head, nope, not interested, no, that's not going to work. And that attitude is purely based on the fact that he doesn't like the concept of seniority, then we're going to have a problem, I will tell you that much. But if you say to your department head, listen, this union has been fighting long and hard to get seniority, what does that mean specifically for your work group? We got to work out the finite details, but I will say that you know, that seniority's going to have to be recognized in the work group, and with the in sections of job assignments, shift selection, and overtime. And if he raises that and makes that statement, well, what's that mean? Every 2 minutes I gotta have a bit, no, that doesn't mean that.
Well, it could.
Yeah, but that's
It
not the
could
goal.
mean that.
The goal is to find out what's going on in that particular department, and to get with the Bruce Lees of the bargaining unit to find out what is going on in his department. I'm convinced there's gonna be some departments that don't have an issue or some sort of significant need to do things by seniority, or they can't. They may have a desire to want to do things by seniority, and by the time we, flush it all out, it's going to turn out that we can't. Well, listen, I understand we have 4 secretaries that work here, and it's a bad example. We have 4 techs that work here, but this is, there's 4 different types of techs, and I understand that you're senior to this tech, but like we just explored with Bruce's situation, we got to be practical about this. I mean, we have to be realistic about this. How is the work going to get done if you were going to take the easy job, you got put into this job? We're cognizant of that. We recognize that there has to be a solution. We can't just bring things to a grinding halt. And the reason you have my commitment to make this happen is because if this language doesn't work, I'm sure we're going to either end up in multiple arbitration, which I don't want to do. Like you may think I want. I have better things to do to go to arbitration. They're a pain in the ass and they're expensive. And I also want this language to survive the successor agreements. And I know that's only going to happen if it's working, like it's working in Hernando. Because if it's not working, you're going to come after it and you're going to go to impasse over it and say, no, not another 2-3 years of this crap. It's got to go. So I want this language to succeed. I want it to work.
One of your guys is a good guy to work with him. I bring Mark in. He's a level-headed person that's got a lot of respect.
Well, my only point is, I want to see what you're talking about before we agree to the article. I don't think that's unreasonable.
All right, well, knowing what our need is, and I understand what your hesitation is, how do we find a solution? Working together. How do we do
Well,
that?
either you
Can we
show
do-
me what you're talking about by departments, what you want to use seniority for, and then we can take a look at it. I can go back to my department heads, or we're back to another language.
Well, any other language in this is just probably not going to work too well. So if Jim seems to understand that we could, I sensed that there is the possibility that we can agree to this language and then immediately get down to business with developing procedures. But that is a possible way of doing this. I don't want to have a whole lot of time invested into something that's, you just at the end of the day say, no, we're not interested. I want to get that commitment, say, yeah, we're willing to do this, but John, maybe we can dedicate a bargaining session to just this. I don't know. I'm just looking for a solution.
Well, I'm not looking for anything real time consuming. Just, Department A, use it for ABC. Department B, 1, 2, 3, whatever.
Okay, how about this? Can you give me a list of the departments that you feel?
Do you have 1,000 employees? They're all over the place. You just came up with text, there's all sorts of different
Why don't we
texts.
start with this? Why don't we,
And then the other thing is, they're separate, they're not just going by job title, they're going by work group. So that makes it even more complicated.
I think as a
Have
story,
to, like,
no, I think as a